for being part of this initiative. And I think your story is pretty enlightening. Why don't you start by giving us a bit of a feedback of who you are and what you're doing right now?
I studied economics back in Argentina, and the first thing I did after leaving college was working as a trader for Monsanto. And I'm still apologizing. I didn't know that Monsanto was the devil at that point in time. As an environmentalist, I still feel guilty about that. But, I had just left university. Everybody was trading. So I did tradings of grains and futures and forwards. And that was a great training at that point. And after that, I started working at Unilever. And I ended up, after 6 years, managing Dove, Real Beauty. So I clean a little bit of that karma for Latin America. And with that, I start getting close to senior management at Unilever. And one of them, still my mentor, Mike Kozozok, chairman of Latin America, told me, like, you, the brunette girl, you're ready to go outside, to go to the north. And I was like, what do you mean? It's like, well, you should do an MBA in the US. I'm like, well, maybe that's a good idea. And so I applied, not expecting much, honestly. And but in the end, I got accepted in an Ivy League school. I was very surprised. I got a little bit of a scholarship. Of course, I was not able to afford that. And that was magic for my career. It truly was very, not only revealing, but it opened a ton of doors for me. And so after that, I worked for Nike, for Under Armour in the US. And after a couple of years of working in football, because apparently being an Argentinian gives you some sort of pedigree to talk about football, even if you're a girl. I got offered the position to be the general manager of Mercado Libre, which is the basically the Amazon of Latin America. And at that point in time, it was a $7 billion company. And I experienced the expansion of Mercado Libre to be a north of like $40 billion company. And it was exciting. It was revealing. It was very instructive. And it was also causing some sort of burnout in me because I was sleeping 2-3 hours a day. And after a couple of years of doing that and experiencing that roller coaster ride, I decided to leave the company and jump into the entrepreneurial world. I started a company. I joined 2 female founders, both of them techies, and we started a software development company doing nearshoring, which is a very profitable business because you pay salaries in Latin America, but you sell projects, innovation projects in the developed world, mainly the US. So I moved to New York City. I was 37 at that point in time. And that was also a great, more rewarding roller coaster. I ended up selling the company to Accenture early this year, January this year, after 5 years of studying it. And we ended up having north of 400 developers. And well, with that, I mean, both being a senior manager and having the Ivy League credential and having a exit on my shoulders allowed me to, apply to being a board member for public companies. Honestly, the first position that I hold was offered spontaneously because I work in the innovation program for Rotoplas. And that first step opened up this path for many more to come. I'm currently at the board. I sit at the board of a bunch of public companies in Mexico and in the US. I'm part of Agile Thought, which is like a bigger version of Wallux. It's listed at NASDAQ. I sit at the board of Banco Compartamos, that is very dear to my heart. It works on microcredit, especially targeting women. At this point in my career, I don't know anything that has no impact, or I'm not enjoying the people that I'm working with. I have that privilege, which is great. I stopped doing that the moment I left the corporate world. And so I use that independence, and I'm very proud of actually taking advantage of that situation. And so I got contacted by the World Bank, the IFC, actually, that's the financial arm of the World Bank. And I represent the IFC in some of the boards where they made significant investments. And with that came, that's part of like, I would say a very rewarding aspect of my job right now, which is they train you as a board member to work a lot. I mean, especially being a woman, in diversity and inclusion initiatives, and also carbon reduction path, like the creation of carbon reduction with the companies that I work with. So with that, I represent the IFC, and I sit at the board of a couple other banks, regional banks in Latin America. So I have a full agenda, but I work like after earnings call, actually before and after earnings call season. And then I have a couple of weeks of relaxing time in which I work in some other projects. I'm an angel investor. I try to help women entrepreneurs in Latin America actively. I have a bunch of mentees that I'm very proud to work with. I see a lot of myself in them, and people that are doing like Little Wallexes, that is a company that I have, but with social impact, truly ingrained in the business model. And I wrote a book. It launched in August this year. It's called A World Without Bosses, or Un Mundo Sin Jefes in Spanish. And it's basically this transition that I'm talking about, how I moved from, a fairly humble background, middle class background in Argentina, in the south of the Southern Cone, to, I'm so proud of that, and to doing an MBA and getting a scholarship, and the struggles of adjusting to the US, and then working as a senior manager. Being a woman in Latin America, I was the youngest general manager of my generation of a Fortune 500. That was a lot of work. That caused a lot of health issues for me. I went through cancer, I recovered, I founded a company, I did a lot of social impact, and here we are.
Marina, are the biggest, it's truly inspiring. Really, thank you for being part of this initiative. In your book, can we find specific advice for the next generation of Latin American women leaders?
Oh, absolutely. It's all about that. Indeed, I'm very surprised when I receive messages almost every day. I open my inbox and I have women writing to me saying things like, I quit my job. I'm doing a designing your life process to decide what my next step looks like. I'm being very proactive and taking responsibility for my career. I'm taking a sabbatical. Like, I'm hearing it all. I think the book, it's the source for each and every person's soul to talk to themselves, because it's very funny how certain aspect of the book resonates with some people and certain other aspects of the book resonate with some other people. But it's a very practical book. It's like, and it's all about my crisis. Each chapter is a crisis, and each chapter is how I solve that huge crisis. So it's like, find a mentor, work on your financial independence before getting married or finding a boyfriend when you're very young. Design your career. Don't let life decide where you're going to end up spending 8, 9, 10 hours of your day. Connect with the things that get you in flow, which is that feeling that you're ecstatic and time, flies. And so it's very practical. But my main objective was just to inspire people to get out from places where they are not happy. The truth is, statistically, 7 out of 10 people are unhappy with their jobs. They are not engaged. And the last Gallup numbers this year were even worse, right? After the pandemic, it's like 8 out of 10 people are not engaged with their job. And that is, it's tremendous. Like, America loses the equivalent of the GDP of places like New Zealand or Greece in work-related diseases such as anxiety, depression, insomnia. And so that is a very sad social reality that we need to tackle as a community, as a whole. And so bringing awareness to this problem is a big thing. And I think the book gives people tools to at least manage the transition. Because the reason why 8 out of 10 people are not engaged with their job is when they find themselves at that place of complacency or even close to sadness, burnout, and depression, they don't know how to maneuver that transition.
Thank you, Marina. I'd like to go further on that later on and ask you whether you're engaged in another project inspiring young talent in Latin America. But let's go back to boards and your career as a whole. I really want to ask a specific question, and it has to do with the greatest challenge that you face when breaking the glass ceiling as a women leader in LATAM.
Oof, I have so many stories, but like the funniest one, this is not the biggest, but it's the funniest one, was first board meeting, fresh in the boardroom, 18 men. I'm a 39-year-old young economist with a ton of experience and ideas, but truly seated next to guys that had the caliber of, you know, the CEO of Coca-Cola in Mexico, the CEO of BBVA, like it's one of the largest banks in the region. And we're discussing an M&A. And I'm sitting next to the chairman, which was a very nice gesture, right? Like saying, okay, you belong here. We're giving you this space. And so, but he's not seeing me because we're sitting next to each other. And I see everybody in the room, which is a very privileged place to be. But we're discussing that M&A, and somebody asked why it's Amari, the Brazilian partner, selling the company so cheap. And so everybody's used to having these board meetings as if they were having, like, you know, a friend's barbecue with their friends and drinking beer. And somebody says like, well, the poor guy has 3 daughters. What can you do? Like, he has to sell, right? Because no one is going to take care of that business, that poor guy. And I'm looking at him, and he acknowledges that I'm there and I'm listening, and he's like paralyzed, and he's like in shock, and he doesn't know how to react. And I'm like, dude, it's fine. And what I learned is, like, if you get mad at in those moments, you lose respect. Probably you're going to create antibodies against you. So the best tool that you can use in those moments is humor, basically, to relax the situation. I'm like, it's okay. And he's like, well, Marina, you know, not every woman is like you. And I'm like, well, thankfully so, because otherwise you would have a knife like in your back and I would be stabbing you, like, or something, some comment like that to relax. And so everybody laughed, and then it went by. But it was a huge learning from them. It's like, you know, you need to adjust the tone. Now there is a woman in the room, but also look at the amount of hidden biases, blind spots that you have that translate in your speech. And so the company started a huge process through the leadership, and it cascaded down, it spilled over into the organization to acknowledge and realize that there were a lot of gender biases in the organization. And so that was challenging because I didn't know how to react. And thankfully, so I did it with humor, but that was an interesting one. But I have many more examples. Like we discussed the turnaround of a company, and people refer to that as, well, it's like if you had a 16-year-old girl and you wanted to marry it, what would you do, right? You put it in shape and you take it to the surgeon, and you will like make her look beautiful. Talking about a company, I'm like, oh my God, these guys' daughters are having a really tough time. The biggest challenge is when you confront these biases, where you confront basically the chauvinism of Latin America, how you not get angry, but at the same time you communicate that this is not okay, and the need for the organization as a whole to review their views around gender roles and gender equality. So that's the most challenging aspect, without being patronizing, without making anybody hate you, without being the witch in the room. Because in that sense, then you would be reinforcing all those stereotypes, right?
Thank you, Marina. I'm sure that we could read more about those challenges in your book. Coming back to leadership, and this is a very specific question. What can leaders in the region do to develop and promote more women in leadership roles, Marina?
This is a very controversial one. So I will give you my point of view, but a lot of people disagree with me. I truly believe in affirmative actions and positive discrimination, in the sense that I do believe in quotas. I do at, at the very beginning, because the situation is so bad, and especially in Latin America, just 5% of all companies have women in the boardroom, that it's very hard to find, it's very hard to be something that you cannot see. That's the first thing, right? So younger girls that are starting their careers, they have no role models. So you have to start like creating those role models, even if it's artificially. And then you cannot learn or train yourself to be in the boardroom, but being at the boardroom. It's very hard to, I mean, you can study for years. I have an excellent education, but I didn't learn how to corporate governance work until I was at the boardroom. And there is no theoretical background, no theoretical body of theoretical work that can truly prepare for that, because actually it's a very particular role. You are a sounding board. I mean, without trying to be redundant, but you are the sounding board for the CEO and the senior manager. You are the guy making the hard questions in the room. You are the one challenging them. You're raising the bar. You are trying to think out of the box. And those things are not things that you can teach in a 3-month course in HBS. You know what I mean? And so by listening to all these guys, I'm learning, oh, this is a great question to make when you're doing an M&A. Oh, this is a great question to ask yourself if you're filing to go public with the SEC. And there are so many different situations that the best way of learning is by being in the boardroom. So I truly, truly believe that affirmative action, it's a quick and clean solution for the lack of women in corporate boards.
Thank you, Marina. I'd really like to pick your brain on our first discussion earlier this year. And I remember you sharing with me a very personal story, but I really need you to go to tell us what specific piece of advice would you give to the next generation of Latin American women leaders? And you can start at early ages, because I really remember our conversation around that.
Well, so if we start very, very, very early, there is a great study done by Beyonce. And so I bring Beyonce to the room all of a sudden, through her foundation called BandBossy, bandbossy.org. And BandBossy, it's a foundation, but it's also a movement that did a white paper. And in that white paper, they found out that we do not treat little girls and little boys that have the equivalent of a executive leadership style in the same manner, in the same way. When a guy at the age of 7 says, I want to cross the river with my friends, we totally encourage the kid. And we're like, yes, you're a born leader, go for it. When a girl tries to do that and he's like, I'm going to cross the river with my girlfriends, you're like, oh, you're so bossy, right? And bossy is a term that we use, and inadvertently is a swasher. Like, you are telling that girl that whatever she's doing is not right, because nobody wants to be the bossy. Nobody wants to be not liked by the boys and not liked by her parents. And so getting close to mid school with girls are very interested in, start getting interested in boys and start getting interested in liking boys, start getting like sort of reducing their scope and being not as loud, and trying not to do so many leadership related things so as not to be called or labeled bossy, because bossy girls are not liked by the boys. And that has to do with all the stereotypes that we have attached to the idea of a female leader, right? She's a witch, she's a bitch, in the best cases, or she's a psycho, or too ambitious, or too loud. And so with this, what we're creating is a generation of mid-schoolers that are not interested in leadership roles because they don't want to be disliked by society. And my biggest advice for these girls and their parents is challenge that. Be bossy if you have to be bossy, or ban bossy. And I think that in that regard, at least in America and in Latin America as well, these bias, it's getting more clearly displayed, it's more clearly disclosed, it's more clear for society. And so things are moving in the right direction, right? And but still there's a lot of work to do. I experience and I live and I coexist with these biases every single day.
You're speaking from a very human and open perspective. And I'd really like to ask you if there's anyone that has had a great impact in shaping your career trajectory. And if so, what have he or her has done that was impactful? And I ask this because sometimes we do not reach out for help or look out for mentors, which might really help in this career trajectory.
Okay, I would divide like the answer in three, a very McKinsey style answer. You have three buckets. So I would say a professional level, at a personal level, and I would say more like a social level. And I will start with the later. At a social level, I would say that growing up, the women I admire were Indra Nooyi, all these women, heroine women, Ariane Rosenfeld, that truly had to break the glass ceiling, and they made life easier for all of us coming later. So I would say at a social level, all these first women in power that dare to, be positive role models for the girls that were growing up in the 90s. At a professional level, I have 2 or 3 mentors that were extremely helpful and supported me through my career. And I think it's key when you are trying to advance your career to find that people that are not only mentors, but also sponsors. Women are over-mentored and under-sponsored. And that means a lot of people can give you knowledge, but you need that guy in the room that's gonna bring up your name when the promotion is on the table. And that means connecting with people at a personal level and doing the exact same things that other guys do. And with that, I mean, in your own unique way, but connecting at a personal level. And finding and asking for help, and truly being humble and being hungry enough, using Steve Jobs' words, to find that person that is going to help you. At a personal level, very personal, I come from a lower middle class family from the south of the Southern Cone, as I said. And my grandma never finished high school. My mom is the first professional in my family. And she saved her entire life to pay for my education. She paid my college degree, and she paid a little part of Wharton. And when I got my diploma, I remember I ran away from and I still remember it, and I feel emotional about it. I ran away from the platform, and when we were they were giving the diplomas, and I jumped into the box where my entire family was there, and I gave her the diploma, and I'm like, "This is yours, dude." And then the whole school, the 700 people knew the story, and everybody's clapping her, and she's crying. And so at a personal level, we need to remember that it's always about the team. There has always been somebody behind you, supporting you and believing in you.
Marina, this is incredibly inspiring and touching in a way. I think the way you open up, it's amazing, and I hope your words can reach out to the next senior female leaders, not only in Latin but in this world. As you know, we strive to improve the world is led, and definitely voices like yours are highly heard, and I really, really congratulate you on all your achievements. Is there anything
Thank you.
else you'd like to share? And I don't know, it can be anything, because I think we've covered most of the topics, and your words have been really inspiring, Marina.
Well, as a final message, I would like to say that I wouldn't like to finish with a platitude. I would say it's not easy work, it's hard work. You will have to probably let go some things, because life is about decisions, and every decision, it's you're leaving something on the table. And I spent long nights studying while my friends were like having fun, and I decided to work hard, and I left, and this is the beginning of my book. I left Argentina with $400 and a piece of luggage without wheels. Who does invented a piece of luggage without wheels? That I call yeah, it was like moving a coffin around the world. And at that point in time, I left my boyfriend, my furniture, my house, my everything, following a dream. And that was the best decision I've ever made. So just take risks. If you are not happy where you are, we are living in a very strange world. But the most strange thing is our experience is we're living in a blue ball that it's floating in cosmos. It makes no freaking sense. We don't even understand how the cosmos works. We're inventing things like dark matter and dark energy. I'm reading a lot around like physics lately to truly understand how these things work. We do not understand it, and we are creatures of purpose. And so we are creating stories constantly, and we call them nationality. We're calling allegiance to a team or allegiance to a party, or we even call it names. It's like everything that we experience is a story that we created for ourselves, or our culture created for ourselves. And so the quality of your life is the quality of the stories that you're going to tell yourself. So it's up to you to tell yourself a story in which you're able to do whatever you want, or a story in which you're conditioned by your environment. So tell yourself a good story.
Thank you, Marina. And that could be a topic for your next book, I believe.
Thank you, Claudia.
You've been amazing, and thank you really. And I don't want to thank you for your time, but your openness and your accuracy, and what you've done is amazing. And I truly believe that we'll be having a further conversation with you, because you truly inspired, Marina. Thank you very much for your kind time.
Thank you, guys.